The Constitution is the fundamental law of the land, which is a social contract among the people, defining the state's basic principles: territory, structure of government, political values, and social ideals.
It embodies the aspirations of a people who have land, have territory, who are an independent and sovereign state, and it is composed of a people who feel that they can get together as a state, as a sovereign state, free from any intervention of a foreign power.
And the Constitution, being the fundamental law of the land, all authority must conform to it. Throughout the Philippine Republic's history, we have had 5 constitutions. The Malolos Constitution of 1899, which created the first Philippine Republic, the first democratic republic in Asia.
For his services in the fight for freedom.
The 1935 Constitution, written by a constitutional convention, was adopted during the time of President Manuel Quezon, when we were under a Commonwealth government. One of its important contributions is that it granted women the right to vote. However, before its implementation, the 1935 Constitution was submitted to U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt for so-called approval. And then during World War II, the country, under President Jose P. Laurel, adopted the 1943 Constitution, which legitimized the Japanese occupation. In 1973, for the first time in history, the Constitution provided for a parliamentary form of government to be headed by a prime minister. However, this form of government was not implemented effectively because it was adopted while President Ferdinand Marcos ruled under martial law. When President Corazon Aquino came into power following the EDSA Revolution in 1986, she abolished the 1973 Constitution and implemented a Provisional Freedom Constitution, while a constitutional commission composed of appointed members drafted a new fundamental law. Finally, the 1987 Constitution, ratified by an overwhelming vote in a plebiscite, restored democracy in the country. It also restored the unitary presidential form of government.
While ordinarily a constitution is supposed to be for all time, it is quintessential. It is supposed to be good for not only for the present but also for the future. Nonetheless, one cannot escape the fact that at the time the Constitution is adopted, the provisions of the Constitution are adopted precisely to respond to existing conditions. In fact, even the Supreme Court says that when you interpret provisions of the Constitution in light of the prevailing conditions.
All the Philippines' previous constitutions underwent changes.
In fact, in our history, the 1935 Constitution, which was drafted by the most brilliant Filipinos in Philippine history, perhaps, headed by Claro M. Recto, had to undergo almost immediately a number of amendments. It was less than 5 years old in 1940 when major amendments were proposed and adopted. And then it was to be amended again one more time right after the war. The 73 Constitution of Marcos had to undergo several amendments. It underwent an amendment in 1976, in 1980, in 1981. Because, of course, the Constitution must be responsive to the needs of the people at various times.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker.
The present Constitution, which is the one ratified in 1987, is not an exception.
Because it's been almost 19 years since the EDSA Revolution, and the promise of that revolution was to bring freedom, justice and democracy. And in all that time, we have not been able to really solve our chronic problems: poverty, social inequality, injustice, providing jobs for our people, and so on. We have not been able to provide our people good governance, given our system of government under the Constitution. The highly centralized unitary system that gives very little power and authority and resources to our local governments, who are really facing the people around the country, in all parts of the country. And also our presidential system, which creates so much conflict and gridlock between the President and Congress, and between the House and the Senate, and now between the President and the Senate. These conflicts cause a lot of delays, and in fact, gridlock, paralysis in making policies and laws, and also problems of implementing these policies and programs.
Over the years, proposals for amendments try to address some of these problems. The first attempt to introduce an amendment to the 1987 Constitution was done by the group People's Initiative for Reform, Modernization and Action, or PIRMA.
Let's mention it in the case of the initiative or attempt in 1998 during the Ramos administration. It was seen as a, rightly or wrongly, seen as an attempt to extend the terms of offices of public officials at that time.
And then during President Joseph Estrada's time, he created a preparatory commission on constitutional reform that eventually concentrated on changing the provisions on foreign ownership of land and business. On the other hand, current efforts to amend the 1987 Constitution focus on changing the system of government from unitary to federal, and the form of government from presidential to parliamentary.
I've been a member of the 1986 Constitutional Commission that drafted the 1987 Constitution. I've been in the peace process for a long, long time, since 1996. And I think, to me, because of the over-concentration of powers in Imperial Manila, because of a highly centralized government, we have not developed the regions, the provinces. And this, to me, has contributed to rebellion, to secession, and to conflicts in our country today. So that, to me, federalism is one effective conflict management tool that is worth exploring and considering in the event that our Constitution is amended.
The 1987 Constitution, like all other constitutions, allows for changing its content. And there are three modes by which this can be done. By turning the House of Representatives and the Senate into a constituent assembly. Congress then convenes to study and propose amendments and revisions, apart from its regular sessions to tackle other legislative matters. Or through a constitutional convention, also called CON-CON, where delegates are elected from congressional districts. The CON-CON, although performing the sole task of drafting a new constitution, becomes a co-equal body of Congress. And constitutional amendments can also come through People's Initiative, a process which requires gathering the signature of 12% of the registered voters to support a proposed amendment. However, only one amendment every 5 years is allowed through this mode, and an enabling law still needs to be passed to implement this process.